Good morning, my friends. Today, it appears to be a warm, gray day. I can see the snow is starting to melt a little bit, so that means, we're back to square one of what's usually been happening lately is that we sort of get, a really brutal cold spell, then we get a little bit of snow, and then eventually it turns to rain and muck, and then it goes all the way back down to really cold again, which is probably the most annoying winter I've definitely experienced weather-wise, but, it is what it is. I'm just hoping not all the snow disappears like it did last time, and then we just have this skating rink that sort of permeates throughout the entire city. I'm just hoping that it's not going to last that long. So we'll see what happens. So today, as you all know, it's Friday, and I'm back doing a book review today. Today, this is something I read over the holidays. It's a George Gershwin biography. The title is just called George Gershwin by William G. Hyland. I'm not really sure about the author as much, but after reading the book, I have to say it was a pretty good biography. I've never read a biography by George Gershwin, so I don't really have much a foundation of his history. And in terms of the actual book and keeping my interest, I would say it did an okay job. I will say the extensive research and the way that the writer specifically wants to uncover the truth without honing into specific narratives or trying to construct a specific biased narrative. He's going through and referencing other biographies and trying to just uncover the truth about George Gershwin, because there wasn't really much in terms of understanding who he was as a person. Even though he was a very social and outgoing person, he was, in terms of his personal feelings and life, he was very private in that sense. So he takes a lot of different viewpoints and tries to put them out there, and you can sort of digest it as your own, which I find very good, especially as a biographer. You don't really want to lead the reader into false territory about a person, especially if you want to learn everything about them. So that aspect of it was really interesting, and just learning about his life and his origins and how he was as a student of music, as a creator of music. One of the things, though, that was kind of annoying about reading this book was that the author was pretty extensive, almost too extensive, as to the critique of his work. He definitely referenced a lot of critics at that time and what they thought of it. Most of it was particularly negative. Not to say that the author specifically thinks this way. I think the author was generally a very big fan of George Gershwin and definitely enjoyed it, but he definitely liked to showcase a lot of the controversy surrounding his music at the time, specifically in the, I guess, what you would say the higher class of society, who sort of looked down upon jazz music and of dance music at that time, and looking down on him as an artist for trying to encapsulate that feeling and that composition in his works. And they sort of like to nitpick everything about it, about how his Rhapsody was just a collection of a bunch of songs and it wasn't actually well pieced together as its own construction, which is fair to say because he was never really classically trained. He was trained by, various piano teachers, but in terms of that sophisticated education that a lot of these older composers pride themselves on, he definitely was not a person who was trained in that background. He grew up in Lower East Side, Manhattan, came from a middle-class Jewish family, particularly was a plugger at the time for, show tunes and wrote for Broadway musicals and just basically did pop music for the most part. What is interesting is there's a part in this book actually where he meets Stravinsky. People who are familiar with Stravinsky, he's a very well-renowned composer from Europe, and there was a point where Gershwin was sort of talking to him and asking him for advice, and there was a rumor that after Stravinsky heard how much money Gershwin was making through his music, Stravinsky says, I don't know why he's asking me to learn something, I should be the one asking him, which is, the irony of being a professional, sophisticated composer. You don't really make that much money from it compared to someone who might make pop music. So overall, it was a good biography. I enjoyed learning about who he was as a musician. I still think that the author could have refrained from using so much critical analysis from other people. I think he strayed away too much from actual George Gershwin as a person and focused very much on his career, which is perfectly fine, but I think there's a good balance to be had in terms of constructing a narrative. You don't want to get too bored learning about every single musical he's ever written. It's not really that important. I don't really want to know about all the flops and the generic musicals that he might have written for money or whatnot. It's not really relevant to his story. His story is who he was as a person, what he was feeling at that time, what he was going through relationship-wise with his friends and his family, and it goes into those elements, but I think they were very thinly spread, although maybe it's just this biography was not meant to do that. It was meant to be more of a holistic academic approach to understanding his career, which is perfectly fine, but in terms of, the casual reader who wants to learn about George Gershwin as a person and, have the tidbits of information about his music, which if you're reading the biography, you probably know a lot about, but you would like to know about the inspiration for that music, where it came from, what were the circumstances as to where he made it. I think that those are the more important aspects, which the author does go into, but for me it was a little lackluster in terms of the quantity of that aspect. So overall, it's a pretty good book. I enjoyed it for learning about George Gershwin. In terms as an actual biography, I didn't hate it. I didn't particularly love it that much, but it was good and it did the job well, and the writer was definitely very meticulous with portraying the accurate view as to who he was. I just wish he did it a little bit more rather than focusing only on the career aspects, only on what other people thought of him, which is not as important as who he actually was, right? So anyway, that's all I really have to say, and I hope you have a wonderful day.